male and females that have been sexually abused, and dealt with sex trafficking, molestation, all of that negative stuff that nobody wants to talk about or shuns away from. We handle that uniqueness with our program. And so that's what we do. We also talk with parents to give them an outline of what to look for when it comes down to their child and predators. We do a workshop with that as well. My website is unbrkfth.com, which is the initial for Unbreakable Faith. I'm on Twitter. I am on Instagram, Facebook. I'm out there. Unbreakable Faith. And author underscore Dewitt on Instagram.
Perfect. So take us right from the very beginning of how you got started in all of this. How did you get involved and why did you get involved?
Well, I got involved a couple of years ago. I am a minister, a youth pastor. At the time, I was doing talking to the youth and sharing a very little bit about some of the experiences that I had. And I also worked with women groups and talking with the women in regards to being able to handle some situations. And my friend said to me, Michelle, share your story all the time. Why don't you book? And I'm like, I don't even journal. What are you talking about writing a book? I don't do that. And so she coached me in it, and she was my coach ever since, to go through the whole process. She helped me with coaching, and she also is a publicist. So she was able to publish my book. My book title is I've Been There. And in my book, I do talk, it's an autobiography about me and what I went through as a child dealing with being molested at the age 3.5, 4 years old. I talk about that in my book, and I talk about being raped at 14 as a teenager. That's why I'm so passionate about my organization, Unbreakable Faith, because of all of the trauma and horrific events that had taken place in my life. I grew up in a home with domestic violence, and my dad was very abusive to my mother and to us, verbally and physically abusive. So this is how I got started with this. Like I said before, I've always loved working with the youth. The youth keep me young, they keep me beautiful and young.
I know for me growing up, there were some things of my childhood that I look back and I wish that I didn't actually experience it because I grew up without my mother or my father. And good old grandmother, Big Mama, as we used to call her back in the day, she was there for me. And I look at so many people who I speak with and who I help because one of the ways that I was able to survive and do everything was the church was a big, big part of my life. And from the church, I remember sports being that because I was a child that I didn't ever fall victim to the streets. Thank the good Lord for that. And sometimes I look back with at my past bittersweet because I didn't enjoy it overall. But then sometimes as I got older, I realized that maybe my parents were doing the best that they could do with what they knew at that time. And as you look back, putting aside the molestation and things like that, outside of maybe the way that they would handle you, I guess is an accurate way to put it. Do you think that maybe that was like a learned behavior, or is it just, hey, my parents were just monsters, Terrain?
No, actually looking back at it, just like you said, my parents, they didn't know how to handle things. I still talk with my dad today. My mom, she has gone on to glory. I miss her tremendously. But my dad, even though we went through a lot of things, just like you, going to church, I was brought up with going to church with my grandmother. My mom didn't go a lot, and my dad didn't go at all. But growing up, I think they were just trying to figure it out, you know? And my dad, I believe he dealt with A man working, and in that time, back in those days, you're working and you get no acknowledgments or anything. He worked, his butt off. And he wasn't an alcoholic. He didn't drink at all. The most I've seen my daddy do, he still does it today, smoke cigars. That's the most he's ever done. But I believe he was frustrated with life and being a male. It's tough. And here it is, you have a family and you have I have step brothers and sisters that are older than me. I mean, step sisters that's older than me. But I just believe looking back now that it was just hard on my daddy and he had a lot of frustration and nowhere to blow off steam.
What's something that you wish was different about your childhood experience and maybe you could rewrite, so to speak?
Hmm. Um, I wish that my relationship with my dad was more a whole lot better, a lot closer. Um, I wish that if I could go back to be able to talk with my dad about some of the things that happened to me without being fearful that he would blow up and be mad at me. I would love to have that childhood little girl that goes to her father and have those conversations.
I think that's very important because that's something, and I'm glad you answered that way, because that's something that I always wanted. I always wanted to, even though he's not like the best person anymore, but I wanted like the life of the Cosbys, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Where the parents were so supportive. Instead of my life was more like the Jeffersons, where it was a lot of craziness and a lot of name calling. But what I
Right.
loved about it is that I felt when I watched those shows that I was inspired to know that there's people that look like me, there's people that speak like me, that have the type of family that I wanted. And
Mhm.
even though I didn't grow up with it, I knew as an adult there's two things I wanted to do. One, I want to be totally different than my parents and their experience. And two, if I would ever have a family, I had examples. And
Yeah.
right. And there's one thing I was watching an interview, and there's a story about George Jefferson, since we mentioned the Jeffersons. And he was someone that he grew up in the poor side of his city, and he
Mhm.
worked hard, and him and his wife moved up to the upper side, upper east side, I think it was. And so they're in a wealthier area. And even though it was a show, I remember it being so inspiring that you can pull from this, regardless of your background, your culture, wherever, you can pull from somewhere and
Mhm.
find hope for
Yes.
for your darkest moments. When you are going
Mhm.
through what you're going through, which is very traumatic, where did you draw your strength, your motivation, and your determination to lead a successful life?
My mother, even though my mother had a lot going on, I watched my mom late at night. She would pull her Bible out and eat a cup of ice, and she would read it. And I'm just like, oh my goodness, I want to be like my mom. I want to do everything like her, want to cook like her. So she was inspiring to me. And also, like you said, watching Bill Cosby, I the Cosby Show. Everybody knows that when it's time for the Cosby Show to come on Thursday nights back then, you shut the house down and here we go. We finna watch. Nobody says a word, okay? And so it was so great with that inspiration from them as well, just as you stated, just to have that hope and like, okay, I'm gonna do this. This is what I want to do, and be successful. Because of the situation that I was in, I too said when I have children that I was going to be totally different. I think a lot of people have said that growing up during the times that I grew up in. I believe that that's probably what's going on with society today with our youth, that we all said we're not going to put our youth through what we went through. And we have a whole lot of youth that feel like we owe them something.
Do you believe that together we can get through the trauma that we've experienced as children?
Oh gosh, yes, we can. We really can. We just have to put forth the effort to support one another and not down each other or stabbing each other in the back. Well, this and well, that. Stop looking for the negative and let's go together with the positive and we can help each other build. As they say, it takes a village. That is so true. It takes a village. And I believe strongly in that, that we can work together and help those that have been traumatized through abuse, uh, domestic violence, teen dating violence, all of those, all those organizations that fall under those categories, we came together, I think that we would make a whole heck of a lot different.
What are some of the ways that you yourself are continuing forward to not only make a difference in your own life,
Mhm,
because it's important for you to push yourself, because
mhm.
I know so many people that they can't for the life of them overcome their past. It seems to be that they're always imprisoned by it. You know that dirty suitcase that people just bring around everywhere they go?
Yeah.
It's like that. And what they do is once they open it up, everything comes out, from anxiety to depression to sadness to frustration. So what are some of the ways that you are carrying yourself forward in that regard?
So with that being said, I did not, of course, as a child, receive counseling. Back then, it's what's in the house stays in the house. And so when it came out that I was being sexually assaulted and um, molested, I didn't have the counseling. And a lot of people said with what I went through, the horrific events that I went through throughout my life as a little girl, they were like, how did you get where you are today? And again, I have to push it back towards God, you know. It was him. It was his guidance, it was his leading, it was his direction. Um, I was not, as a little girl, I started off in church and I didn't understand a lot of things, but there was a little something that I loved about church, and that was going with my grandmother and getting out of the house, if you will, which brings me to this point. In order for someone to truly say, listen, I'm tired of carrying around this dirty bag of luggage, you need to get out of that space. And the way that you do it is 1 minute, one step, one day at a time. Set a goal, a small goal, not a large goal. But today, if it's your self-esteem, if it's anxiety that you're going through, if you're constantly replaying this in your mind, then you're not going to be able to move forward. So I tell people, take your time. You went through a lot of grief. Take your time, breathe. One thing that I do know, um, that I tell people too is write the offender a letter. I tell them, write the letter to the offender, the person who violated you. Write their names down if you know the name, and write this letter about how you feel right now, how you felt during that time frame. If you're gonna cry, cry. If you're gonna scream, scream. If you're gonna punch something, just don't tear up your house. Punch something, a pillow or something, go jogging or whatever you have to do to get this out of your system or somewhat out of your system, because it is a lifelong journey. Let me say that again. It's a lifelong journey because it happened. But start somewhere. Write the letter, burn the letter, mail the letter. If you want that person to see it and you want to give it to them, give it to them. If the person is deceased, take the letter and say, you no longer have control over me. I am a free bird after this. I will take my time. I will cry on the days that I need to cry, but I will have joy after my moment of crying, because you don't have bad days. You have bad moments. It's 24 hours in a day. You do not have 24 hours of bad. You have good moments. If you wake up, that's a good moment. If you can see, that's a good moment. If you can feel, that's a good moment. You have to give yourself that encouragement within yourself. You have to encourage yourself. When it came down to me learning how to do this on my own without counseling, it was a lot of work, a whole heck of a lot of work. But now we're in a place where you can get counseling via the web, on the phone, in person. There's so many opportunities for people who have gone through trauma in their life to get the assistance that they need with counseling in the privacy of your own home. No one has to know. Nobody needs to know your business anyway, because your business is just that, unless you want to share it, just as I have, and put it all out there. But I am strong enough to do that. I have that bruise that took place. I fell down many years ago. This is what I think of it as. I fell down, I injured my knee. But now the scab is there, but I don't pick at the scab is because it's over with. It's there, it's in my mind. I know what happened, I know what took place, but I can look at those people in their faces today and I forgive them for what they did. How did I get to that point? Because God said that He wants us to forgive others the same way that He forgive us for our sins. And we all have committed a sin. We all have, but God still gracious us with being able to live today. I don't hate them. People are like, how in the world can you? And it's because I wasn't brought up to hate, even though I went through a lot in my home. Like I said, church family, I was taught how to love people in spite of. I just don't hate anyone. I don't. There's no one I hate. I may not like anything, but people hear you say forgiveness, they think that that means being in a person's face. No, I don't care to see them, but I do forgive them. As a matter of fact, an example is one of the persons that, the person that raped me, that individual, he had a seizure in front of me and fell to the ground. And I was standing there when he fell, and it was a horrible seizure. And I remember telling my grandmother that he was going to be okay because she was very upset. And I was just right there with him and holding him while he was going. There we go. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, that happened. And so therefore I was just like, God built me the way that I love people. I don't hate anyone. I went through domestic violence. I don't hate him. I hate what happened, but I don't hate him. I'm blessed. I am truly blessed to have what I have today and be able to talk about it without having any type of shame or anything. None of that.
For those who are watching on Facebook, YouTube, and my social media, stay tuned for more incredible interviews like the one we have with Michelle. And we will be back for more. So stay tuned, everybody.